Before we begin this story of betrayal and healing, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more unforgettable stories, and let us know in the comments, have you ever trusted the wrong person? We'd love to hear your story. Miriam never asked for much. She wasn't the kind of woman who dreamed of luxury or fame. All she ever wanted was to love and be loved back. To build a quiet life filled with small joys, a warm dinner, shared laughter, the comfort of a hand resting gently on hers. But sometimes, life hands you someone who doesn't know how to hold a heart, let alone protect it. She met Daniel when she was just 22. He was sharp, charming, ambitious, everyone said so. He called her his calm in the storm, and she believed him. For years, Miriam built her world around Daniel. She packed his lunch before work, ironed his shirts, remembered his mother's birthday when he didn't. When she smiled at him across the table, he used to smile back. Used to. Lately, Daniel had become distant. His smile felt hollow. His hugs became one-armed gestures. He worked late more often, came home smelling like expensive cologne that Miriam didn't recognize. At first, she blamed herself. Maybe she was too dull. Maybe the lines forming around her eyes were too deep. Maybe the extra weight on her hips made her invisible to him. She tried harder. She cooked his favorite meals. She wore perfume he once said he liked. She asked about his day, only to receive one-word replies. Fine. Busy. Tiring. The tipping point came one evening when she found a silk scarf tucked into the passenger side of Daniel's car. It wasn't hers. It smelled like roses and smoke. The initials, YEL, were embroidered at the edge. Miriam knew, and yet she waited. Maybe he would come clean. Maybe he would tell her there was a mistake. But days passed, and nothing came. Only more distance. More silence. Then Alina showed up. Her younger cousin. Pretty, confident, unpredictable. Alina had always been the one who drew stares in a room, who laughed too loud and danced without music. She started dropping by unexpectedly, sitting a little too close to Daniel, laughing a little too hard at his dull jokes. Miriam noticed, but she didn't want to believe. Until the night she overheard them. Miriam had left her phone in the kitchen. As she turned back from the hallway, she froze at the sound of Alina's voice drifting from the living room. She's like a houseplant, Daniel. Always there, easy to ignore. Then Daniel replied, I just need to move things around, make her think it's her idea. I can't take this beige life anymore. Beige, that's what she was to him. Not a person, not a wife, just wallpaper. She didn't burst in screaming. She didn't throw anything. She simply walked back to their bedroom, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. That night, she didn't sleep. At dawn, she packed a bag and left. But Daniel had already beaten her to it. When she walked into the kitchen, she found him waiting with papers. He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. Miriam, he said flatly, this isn't working anymore. You know it. I've already spoken to a realtor. We're selling the house. Her heart raced. Selling? Without even asking me. I bought it, he snapped. It's in my name. I've arranged everything. You'll get a settlement. Just don't make this dramatic. Dramatic. Her voice cracked. You're leaving me for Alina, my cousin. He shrugged, as if she'd mentioned the weather. She understands me. She makes me feel alive. Miriam wanted to laugh and scream at the same time. Alive? Was betrayal his definition of life? I gave you everything, she whispered. No, he said coldly. You gave me comfort. I need fire. He walked out, leaving the divorce papers on the counter. Miriam stood alone in the silence. The smell of coffee lingered in the air. A cracked mug sat by the sink, hers. The home she had poured herself into for nearly a decade was now just walls. It wasn't just Daniel's betrayal. It was Alina's too. Someone who had once braided Miriam's hair at family barbecues, who used to call her Big Sis when they were little. She had stolen more than a husband. She had shattered Miriam's idea of safety. The next morning, Miriam left the keys on the table and walked out of the house with nothing but a suitcase, her grandmother's ring, and a heart cracked wide open. She moved into a small flat on the edge of town, above a bakery that smelled like cinnamon and fading dreams. The walls were thin. The windows creaked. But it was hers. People called it a fall from grace. But Miriam wasn't falling. Not yet. She was simply learning how to stand again. Rain had a way of making everything feel heavier. Air, silence, memory. It had been 3 weeks since Miriam left the life she'd built with Daniel. Her mornings were quiet now. No sound of a second toothbrush. No coat hanging by the door that wasn't hers. And though silence filled her apartment, it wasn't empty. It was space to breathe. Space to feel. Space to hurt, honestly. She didn't cry every day anymore, but the ache came in waves, unexpectedly. Like when she'd pass a bakery that sold his favorite pastries, or when she'd see a couple laughing while sharing an umbrella. Some days, anger replaced the pain. Other days, it was numbness. But most days, she just survived. On one such afternoon, the sky hung low, and a drizzle coated everything in a fine silver mist. Miriam stepped out of the corner grocery store with a brown paper bag clutched to her chest. The rain made the streets shimmer. She hurried along, mind lost in thought, until she saw him. He was sitting on a wooden bench beside the old bakery below her flat, completely soaked. Head bowed. Long hair plastered to his forehead. His coat was threadbare, and a rust-colored scarf hung loosely around his neck. A rolled-up sleeping mat rested beside him, damp and curling at the edges. People passed without looking. Or they looked, but quickly away. But Miriam paused. She didn't know why. She took a few steps closer. The man didn't flinch. "Are you okay?" she asked, voice soft. No response. Just slow, calm breathing. His eyes remained closed. She looked down at the bag in her arms. Inside was a warm pastry she didn't really feel like eating anymore. Without overthinking it, she pulled it out and held it toward him. He opened his eyes slowly. Deep set, Hazel. Quiet. "I'm not asking for anything," he said gently, voice low and weathered. "But thank you." "It's just bread," Miriam replied. "But it's warm." He took it carefully, like it might break if he gripped too hard. Their fingers didn't touch, but something passed between them anyway. "I'm Miriam," she added, awkwardly. He gave a slow nod. "Eli." She nodded once, then left. Back in her apartment, she watched from the window as he sat, still, eating quietly. He didn't beg, didn't chase anyone, just existed, unbothered by judgment, untouched by time. The next day, she saw him again. And the day after. Sometimes he was sitting by the bench. Other times near the back alley of the bakery, helping an elderly vendor fix crates. He never asked for money, never caused a stir. He was just there. And people avoided him just the same. A week passed. Then one evening, she returned from work to find her kitchen faucet gushing water from a cracked joint. The landlord hadn't returned her last 2 calls. She stood there, trying to catch the spray in bowls and rags, when a knock came at her door. It was Eli. He held a small toolbox. "I heard the water. Might be your valve," he said simply. Miriam hesitated, but then stepped aside. He worked silently, quickly, confidently. Hands steady, movements precise. He replaced a seal, tightened the base, and cleaned up after himself. She offered him tea. He hesitated. "Only if you sit too," he finally said. So they sat. 2 strangers. 2 bruised souls. 1 table. No past. Their conversation was soft, like rain on rooftops. He never spoke much about his life, and she didn't press. But from the way he listened, the way he looked at the world like it was both fragile and sacred, Miriam knew there was depth behind those quiet eyes. He told her about books he liked, philosophy, poetry. About places he'd seen, a forest in Oregon, fishing villages in Greece. He spoke of them not like a tourist, but like someone who had been lost in them, who had left pieces of himself in every street. "Are you always moving?" she asked once. He nodded. "Until now, I guess." "Why now?" Eli looked at her and said nothing, but his silence was full. As days passed, Miriam began noticing small things, like how Eli would carry heavy boxes for the baker downstairs without being asked, how he'd help an old woman cross the street while others honked, how he'd pause, truly pause, to watch the wind move through trees. People still stared. Some sneered. One shopkeeper muttered to her, "You're too kind." Men like that always want something. But Miriam had learned something the hard way. Not every monster wears rags, and not every villain knocks. One day, she received a message from Alina. A single photo. Eli sitting beside her building. Captioned, "Really? You fell this far?" Miriam stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. The next evening, Eli came by again. She opened the door before he knocked. "I made soup," she said. "It's too much for one person." He smiled faintly. "Lucky me." They ate in silence. Not awkward, just peaceful. And for the first time in months, Miriam didn't feel invisible, or betrayed, or beige. She felt seen. The sun was setting in streaks of gold and rust when Miriam heard the knock. She wasn't expecting anyone. Eli had just left an hour ago, after helping her rearrange her shelves. They'd laughed at how he insisted on aligning the spice jars alphabetically, and she'd told him he was ridiculous. He just smiled and said, "Even chaos deserves structure." Now, standing at the door, she felt something in her chest tighten. Not fear. Not quite. When she opened it, her heart dropped. Daniel. He looked nothing like the man who had left her with divorce papers and cold eyes. His tailored coat was wrinkled. His jaw was covered in stubble. He smelled faintly of alcohol and regret. "Miriam," he said, voice rough. "Please, can I come in?" She didn't move. "Why are you here?" He ran a hand through his hair, eyes scanning the hallway like someone fleeing a ghost. "She's gone," he muttered. "Alina. She took everything." Miriam blinked. "What?" "She drained my accounts. My cards were declined this morning. She left a note saying I was boring and broke. That's it. Gone." Miriam should have felt vindicated, but all she felt was tired. "And you came to me?" she asked. He stepped forward. "Miriam, you were always stable. You understood me. You were safe." "Safe?" she repeated. "Like a seatbelt? Like insurance?" He looked up, desperation pooling in his eyes. "I made a mistake. A huge one. I need you." A voice interrupted from down the hall. "She doesn't." Daniel turned sharply. Eli stood near the stairwell, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. Miriam felt the air tighten between the two men. Daniel scoffed. "Oh, of course. The Wanderer. You sleeping with him now? That what this is?" Miriam's face flushed, not from shame, but fury. "You don't get to talk to me like that," she snapped. Daniel pointed at Eli, sneering. "This guy? He looks like he sleeps under bridges. What could he possibly offer you?" Eli stepped forward then, voice even, but piercing. "Peace," he said. Daniel laughed bitterly. You're a nobody." Eli tilted his head slightly. "I was an architect. Owned a firm. Built buildings all over the country." Daniel froze. "But after I lost my wife and daughter in a car crash," Eli continued, "I walked away. From all of it. Nothing made sense anymore. Money didn't matter. Awards didn't matter. I lost myself. So I wandered." He looked at Miriam, not Daniel. "And then I met someone who reminded me what it felt like to be human again." Silence fell. Daniel tried to recover. "You expect me to believe that?" "I don't care if you do," Eli replied. Miriam stepped between them. "You threw me away, Daniel. Like I was nothing. And now you want back in because you've lost your new toy." He looked at her pleadingly. "I loved you once." She shook her head. "No. You loved control. You loved what I did for you. And when I stopped fitting into your fantasy, you replaced me with someone who would flatter your ego." Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. "Eli never asked me to be less," she whispered. "He sees me. All of me." Daniel looked at her, stunned. For the first time, perhaps, realizing that the woman he dismissed had grown stronger in his absence. He left without another word. The door closed behind him with a finality that echoed in Miriam's chest. Later that night, she and Eli sat on her tiny balcony, a blanket over their laps, mugs of tea warming their hands. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Didn't know what?" "What you'd been through." He nodded slowly. "It's not something I say easily. But you deserve to know." She looked at him. "You didn't owe me anything." "No," he said. "But kindness should be met with truth." They sat in silence again, the kind that wasn't empty but full of unspoken understanding, of the weight of shared wounds. Finally, she asked, "Do you ever stop wondering?" He glanced at her, a faint smile on his lips. "Only when you find something worth staying for." She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Miriam had always been the kind of woman who waited. Waited for the right moment. Waited to be chosen. Waited to be loved the way she deserved. But not anymore. 3 months had passed since Daniel had come crawling back, since the last trace of her old life had shown up on her doorstep and was told it wasn't welcome anymore. Something had shifted inside her since that day, not suddenly, but steadily, like a sunrise you don't notice until the room starts glowing. And Eli? He never pushed. Never asked for more than what she offered. He simply stayed consistent, quiet, reliable. Not in the way Daniel had been reliable to outsiders, but in the way that mattered, with presence, not promises. Together, they began to dream, not loudly, not foolishly, but with purpose. There was an old building just down the street from Miriam's flat, abandoned for years. Its windows were boarded, its brick faded. Most people passed it without a second glance. But one morning, as they walked by, Eli paused. "This place could breathe again," he said. Miriam looked up at the structure. "You think so?" He nodded. "You give it warmth. I'll give it shape." And that was the beginning. They scraped together what little savings she had, and Eli picked up part-time work helping a local carpenter. Miriam baked pastries and sold them to the corner cafes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs. Together, they started fixing the building, brick by brick, floorboard by floorboard. It was slow, but so was healing. They planned to open a space that wasn't just a cafe, it would be a refuge, a place for wanderers of all kinds, for the brokenhearted, for the overlooked, for people who, like them, had been dismissed but never defeated. They called it the Second Light. One afternoon, as Eli hung the first coat of paint on the new sign, Miriam watched him from the doorway. He looked different now, not because he had changed, but because she was finally seeing him without the noise of fear or judgment. He had the hands of a builder, the eyes of a poet, and the soul of someone who had lost and still chose to show up. She brought him a glass of lemonade and laughed when he smudged paint on her cheek. "You missed a spot," he said, brushing it away. "Did I?" she teased. "Only everywhere," he replied, softly. The townspeople began to notice. First, it was whispers. Is that the same guy who used to sit on the bakery bench? Then it turned to curiosity, then admiration. People donated chairs. Someone offered second-hand books. A retired musician offered to play every Sunday. Even those who once looked at Eli like a stain now nodded as they passed. One person, however, hadn't changed. Daniel. He saw the sign going up while driving by. That night, he stormed into the half-finished cafe while Miriam was arranging chairs. "You think this project, makes up for throwing your marriage away?" he snapped. Miriam didn't flinch. "It wasn't me who threw it away." "You really think people are going to buy into this sob story?" he sneered. "That he's some reformed drifter and you're some saint?" "No," she replied calmly. "I think people are tired of pretending the world only belongs to the polished." Eli entered quietly from the back, rag in hand. "I steady." "Leave," he said. Daniel turned to him. "Or what? You'll write me a poem." "No," Eli said, stepping closer. "I'll ask you again. And the second time won't be so kind." Daniel scoffed, but left, and he never came back. That night, Miriam and Eli sat on the floor of their nearly finished cafe. No lights yet, just candles and the smell of fresh paint. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "You're not just a wanderer anymore," she said. He smiled. "No." She looked around. "You've built something again." He turned to her. "Not alone." The day of the opening was quiet and perfect. Miriam wore a simple white linen dress, not for him, not for anyone else, but because it made her feel clean and strong. Her hair was tied back, her eyes were bright. The doors opened slowly, and people came, not in crowds, but in waves. A single mother with her toddler, an old man carrying a sketchpad, a young couple holding hands tightly, silently, all of them looking for warmth. And they found it. Miriam stood behind the counter as Eli handed out coffee and pastries. Music played from an old record player. The laughter came slowly, like the light of dawn, but it came. She stepped outside for a breath. The sign above her read "The Second Light" in simple, hand-painted letters. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel abandoned. She didn't feel less than. She didn't feel invisible. She felt whole. Because the truth was, she had never been too boring. She had never been too plain. She had only been with someone who couldn't recognize gold because he was too busy chasing glitter. Now, she was with someone who saw value in the broken, strength in the quiet, beauty in the ordinary. She hadn't fallen in love with a wanderer. She had found someone willing to stay. If this story moved you, hit the like button and share it with someone who needs a reminder that strength grows from pain. Subscribe for more powerful, true-to-life stories, and drop a red heart in the comments if you believe love can find you in the most unexpected places.